and the rumors are true. The Minnesota Vikings have brought back defensive end Everson Griffen, who is now going into his 13th season with the 13th season in the NFL. Played 12 of those seasons with the Minnesota Vikings under Andre Patterson defense, and last year was between the Detroit Lions and Dallas Cowboys. Was traded midway through the season, and the Vikings, I believe, did play him. It was either once or twice. Vikings played the Cowboys and Lions twice last year, but Everson Griffen was not with them for all of the games. I think when the Vikings played the Cowboys, he was already traded by then, if I remember correctly. But anyways, the Minnesota Vikings did play Everson Griffen at least one game with the Lions, I remember. But this came by kind of a surprise because these rumors were surfacing a lot during the start of offseason where the Minnesota Vikings needed defensive ends. Defensive end was one of the biggest needs going into this offseason, and this is coming off of a season where Vikings were dead last in pass rush, and the entire defensive end role as a whole looked terrible. Our best defensive end last year was DJ Wanham, who's likely not even going to start this upcoming season. So well, take away Unique Ngakoue. I have to remind people, yes, Unique Ngakoue was our best defensive end last year. However, he only played 4 games with the team, so we're not going to count him in this list. So outside of that, it was DJ Wanham, rookie 4th-round draft pick out of South Carolina. With that being said, though, since then, the Vikings have added Stephen Weatherly. Vikings have drafted Patrick Jones and Janarius Robinson in the 3rd and 4th round of this year's draft. So adding all of these defensive ends and having a lot of defensive ends coming back from last year, it looked like the Vikings weren't going to bring back Everson Griffen. Now, that's only one of the reasons why the Vikings wouldn't have brought him back. The main reason was because of his tweets that he tweeted last January about Kirk Cousins and also about Mike Zimmer. But we're not going to really get into that because we've got into that a lot. And that was the biggest reason why the Vikings weren't going to bring him back. And then on top of that, obviously, he's an aging player. I mean, he's 34 years old going into his 12th season. It did come by kind of surprise that the Vikings did bring him back after all that Minnesota Vikings and Everson Griffen has gone between them over this offseason, but hopefully before the season starts, it can work out. And these big problems about him being an aging player, about the Vikings having many defensive end now, and then also about the Kirk Cousins and locker room issues. Hopefully this all can work out by week 1 of the regular season, because this is a bigger issue than people are even realizing, because when there's an issue within the locker room, especially when it involves the quarterback, the team can fall apart easily, even though they're on different sides of the ball. He's a defensive end pass rusher, and Kirk Cousins a quarterback. They're on different sides of the ball, but still, when there's conflict in the locker room, this can really tear a team apart. On top of that, the Vikings did have a fight in this week's practice, which this kind of leads me on to that. Jalen Holmes and Garrett Bradbury did fight during practice, which when you look at the two guys, Jalen Holmes is a pretty small guy, so I hope Garrett Bradbury is a pretty small guy, so I hope the other offensive lineman, Brian O'Neill, was protecting him, because he's pretty small to be a starting center, which is why he does get overpowered by a lot of these nose tackle players. But with that being said, Jalen Holmes, I mean, that conflict can easily be solved. You just cut Jalen Holmes. He has no place on this roster anymore. He has one more year left in his contract, and he did have no sacks last year where he started a majority of the season. So Jalen Holmes has to get off the roster. But coming back onto the Everson Griffen thing, the Minnesota Vikings and Everson Griffen, hopefully these issues can be worked out, because this can ruin the Vikings season, or it can make the Vikings season. Because last year, the Vikings were dead last in pass rush. I believe, taking away Unique Ngakoue as a whole, because we don't want to remember that we gave up a 2nd-round draft pick for him, Vikings had, I believe it was 18 sacks throughout the entire season. Now, to put that into perspective right now, bringing back Everson Griffen, and we have Danielle Hunter, 2 amazing pass rushers right there. You have Hunter and Sack Daddy, who are one of the best defensive end duos in Minnesota Vikings history. In 2019, when these 2 players were healthy and played the entire season, they combined for 23.5 sacks. I just did my fact check. They combined for 22.5 sacks. Still excellent. I mean, if these 2 players, now they're older than they were. Danielle Hunter's coming off of an injury. Everson Griffen is going into 34, and you've already seen a little bit of a decline last year. But these 2 players coming back and just being our starting defensive end duo, assuming Everson Griffen does win that starting role, this solves our Vikings defense. Because I said going into this season, the big question mark on this Vikings defense is in the pass rush. Because Everson Griffen is coming off of, or Danielle Hunter is coming off of an injury where he didn't play the entire 2020 season and can look a lot worse than he did last year. Anthony Barr is also coming off of an injury and just got injured again. Those are our 2 biggest pass rushers. Outside of that, we have Stephen Weatherly. We have these DJ Wanham, a bunch of just average pass rushers right there as a whole. But looking at this really can solve the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense as a whole is completely different than it was last year, because last year the Vikings were all rookies, second-year players, very young players outside of Harrison Smith. Now going into this next season, it is a completely different story. Our entire defensive front are veterans. Our secondary, most of them seem to be over 30, if I can remember right now, because we have Bashaud Breeland, we have Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith, and then now we have Everson Griffen, another player over 30. Our linebacker group is very solid. I mean, if they can stay healthy, linebackers look solid, especially Eric Kendricks, best middle linebacker in the NFL. And now pass rushers, if Everson Griffen does look like somewhat how he did in 2019, Vikings are set on defense. And this can outperform our 2017 Vikings defense. It can. Problem is, it's going to be hard to keep these guys healthy. That's the only problem on this Vikings defense. A lot of them are injury-prone guys. So first of all, this is assuming Everson Griffen looks like Everson Griffen. However, he has to earn his spot first. And this is why going into this next preseason game, Everson Griffen will start the game, and he needs to earn his spot alongside Danielle Hunter to start week 1 on this Vikings defensive front. He has to win his spot over 2 players. And those 2 players are DJ Wanham and Stephen Weatherly, who have been starting these last 2 preseason games, and all in all, don't look that great. So Everson Griffen just needs to outperform these guys, and he can win that role. So you take a look at the last season, 2020 season, Everson Griffen played 14 games where he racked up 6 sacks and a 63.2 PFF grade. Now he played 14 games. However, Everson Griffen only started 2 of those 14 games. And that just means that he didn't play as much as 14 games may seem like he played. While Stephen Weatherly started 9 games with the Carolina Panthers with 0 sacks and a 53.7 PFF grade. DJ Wanham played 14 games with the Minnesota Vikings, starting 2 of those games where he had 3 sacks and a 51.1 PFF grade. So you look at last year's stats as a whole, Everson Griffen did decline compared to his seasons prior. However, he's still outperforming Stephen Weatherly and DJ Wanham. So that's why I'm saying right here, our defensive end duo is back. The defensive end duo with Everson Griffen and Danielle Hunter has returned, because I have faith that Everson Griffin's going to win this role over Stephen Weatherly and DJ Wanham, and that's not saying a whole lot. I don't have faith that he's going to look like 2017 Danielle Hunter or 2017 Everson Griffen that we saw, but he should look better than Stephen Weatherly and DJ Wanham this preseason game. And that's the only spot on the defense that we're really going to be focusing on. It's the only spot on the defense that is up for grabs right now, as every other spot on this Vikings defense is locked down at their spot. I'm talking about starting positions here, are all locked down. This is the only spot that's really up for grabs. I mean, you can say third linebacker is, but Nick Vigel's going to start week 1. There's no doubt about that. But the defensive end spot is up for grabs. And people are probably questioning why I'm not putting any rookies on this list, because yes, we did draft Patrick Jones in the 3rd round, Janarius Robinson in the 4th round, who will likely be injured week 1. However, knowing Mike Zimmer, he's not even going to question starting rookies day 1, unless if they're drafted in the 1st round. Mike Zimmer is not going to start any rookies week 1, at least not this year. He did last year because we really needed it, but this year it's not going to happen. So taking a look at that, we will be previewing this matchup week 3, and this will be one of the spots that we'll be paying the most attention to. It'll be defensive end, and it will be offensive line and special teams return game, and wide receivers, because our wide receivers so far these first 2 preseason games look terrible. And a lot of that is because of quarterback play. Even when Kirk Cousins was out there, wide receivers didn't look very good. I'd expect this Vikings defense to be close, if not better than the 2017 Vikings defense, assuming these players will stay healthy. Now, injuries will ruin us, as it does every year, but assuming it looks pretty close, our first team Vikings defense should look better than 2017. One of the best teams against the run. I will say it right now, the Vikings will be a top 5 team against the run this year because of Eric Kendricks and our 2 defensive tackles. So let me know what y'all think. How do you think this Minnesota Vikings game will go? Will Everson Griffen even win the starting role? Because he has to outperform DJ Wanham and Stephen Weatherly, first of all. Everson Griffen was a good signing, in my opinion. Yes, the Vikings have... How many do they have? Currently 9 defensive ends on the depth chart, so they're going to have to cut a lot of these because usually you only want 4 or 5, so he's taking someone's spot right here, and it's going to be a big battle for those defensive end positions, because we might have to see Hercules Montaafa get cut. We're going to see Jalen Holmes get cut. Let me know what y'all think.